Hello folks! Get it? Welcome back to the Learn FCL series where you can learn FCL in short, bite-sized bits. As always, my name is Kim. I'm a developer advocate here to teach y'all how to pass in arguments to our Cadence scripts. An overview of what we'll learn today is 1. How to pass in simple arguments like integers, passing in multiple arguments and multiple argument types, and then we'll move on to passing more complex types such as arrays and dictionaries. Cool? Let's go. Cool, so we'll be using Code Sandbox as we did in our last video, and I've also left links to this template down below, so feel free to open that up and follow along the video. A few things before we get started. We have to make sure that our FCL dependency is installed, which it is. We have to make sure we're importing the methods that we'll be using, which is query and config from our FCL. And lastly, we have to make sure our FCL configuration is set up so we're talking to the Flow testnet. As you can see right here, it's sending to the testnet endpoint. Nice, so let's dive in. So for starters, we'll be passing in integers as our arguments. Take a look at our Cadence script down here. Our Cadence script is taking in 2 parameters, which is A and B. They are both type integer, and our return will also be a type integer, which will be A and B summed up. Next, we will define our arguments down below. We have A equals to 5, B equals to 12, and you'll notice we have a toString method being called on our numbers. This is because when passing integers or any numeric value, they will need to be passed in as a string representation. Cool, so next up we will compile our arguments. So args is an FCL utility builder to be used with other builders to pass in arguments with a value and a supported type. You will notice here that we're passing in arg and we're passing in a t, which both respectively are, so arg is a utility builder to be used to create FCL supported arguments for interactions, and T stands for type, which is a type supported by Flow. So as you can see here, we take in the utility function builder and we have our type, and it will output an array of our arguments. So A with the type integer and B with the type integer. This is how we know that this is an integer even though we sent it in as a string representation. Now, off to send to the testnet to do our calculations for us. We have our result here, we have our await and our query. Last time we just sent off just our Cadence script because that's all we had no arguments, but this time we do have arguments. And if you have arguments, all you need to do is pass it in as the second argument, and that's it. So let's go ahead and check that out and see what we'll get. So let's go all the way down here. We have our pass integers function here. I'm gonna uncomment that. And as you can see, the sum of integers is 17. We also console log it, which is 17 down here. And simple as that. Next up, we'll be passing in multiple different types as our arguments. So let's check out our Cadence script over here and notice the parameters and their types. We have a to string, we have a boolean, we have a uFix64, which is a fixed point number, and we have an address. The script is expected to return an address type, which makes sense because we're returning D, and D is the last argument we're going to provide, which is a valid Flow address. Cool, next is defining our arguments. So we have A, which is hello, which is a string. We have true, which is a boolean. We have our 42.0, which is a uFix64, and we have our Flow address 0x01. And before we send it off, we have to compile our arguments with our utility builder as before. And as you can see, we are matching up our arguments with the formatted types that is needed to be sent off with this Cadence function over here. Cool. So now for the test, let's go and call this pass multiple different types. And if you take a look to the right-hand side, you will see that one of our multiple arguments is 0x00000001. Miss, couple hit or miss zeros there. And you can also see in the console log that we have the exact same thing. Now, how can we pass in more complex types like an array? So in our pass function, here we have our cadence script that takes one argument, which is typed an array of strings. You could tell because it's a closed bracket and within it is typed string. So that represents an array of strings. This function will return a string type, which is equal to the first value that we find in our array of strings. Cool. So this will be the array that we're sending in. It has two string values, the first one being hello, the second one being cadence. And next up, we'll need to send off our arguments or build our arguments to be able to send it off. And it's the same as before, but let's take note of how we're actually typing it in our argument types. And as you can see, we have a type array with type strings within the parentheses there, and that's how you define an array of strings. If this was an integer or it was an array of integers, you would simply it would simply look like that. Cool. But let's revert back to string, and this looks like it's good to send off. So let's take a look at what that's going to pass us. We're gonna pass array, and on the right side, it returns the first array element, which is hello. Hello. That is correct. We could also feel free to play around with it, like what happens when we return the second value. We're expecting cadence. Take a look, and we receive cadence. So yeah, that's how you send off arrays. All right, so what about dictionaries, Kim? No worries, that is coming up next. So if we take a look at our cadence script that we'll be sending off, we are taking in one argument, which is a dictionary depicted by the curly braces. This dictionary should have a key value type of string and a value type of integer. We can expect an integer return if there is one, which is why there's a question mark over here. The question mark will unwrap the value if there is one, and if not, it will return a nil. Next, we are defining our argument. So this is very interesting. You should note that dictionaries are represented as an array of key value pairs, which is what is happening here. We have our square brackets to indicate it's an array, our curly brackets to indicate our key value pairs. And our key value pairs is amount, value is 42. 42 is in strings because we represent our integers as string representations. You remember that, good. Cool, and before we send it off, we gotta compile it to indicate the type dictionary. It's simply t.dictionary, and within it is our curly braces and basically our key value as our string type and value as integer. Looks good to me. Let's go ahead and send it off. Pass dictionary, and what do we get back? We get our dictionary field of 42. Let's quickly confirm that. And in our amount, our value is 42, so that is correct, and we are on track. Alrighty, folks, last one for the road. What about complex arguments? For this next one, we will be passing in an array of dictionaries as our argument. Let's dive in. As you can see, we've taken a parameter A, which is an array depicted by our square brackets, and array of dictionary, again with string as the key value type, integer as the value type, and it could return an integer if there is one. Remember the question mark? Cool. So it will return the first dictionary in the array, and in the first dictionary, the key value for amount. So what is the value for the amount in the dictionary that we find in the first array? If we take a look at the argument that we're sending off, you could see by the square brackets that it's an array, and it might look confusing because now there's two, but if you remember from our last example, that dictionaries are represented as an array of key value pairs. So this is why we're seeing double square brackets. It might look confusing at first, but you'll hopefully get used to it very quickly. Cool. And then to type it out, we have a really big type. We have type array, which is type array of dictionaries. And in the dictionaries, this is the type of the key value pairs in that dictionary. So array, dictionary, value types of the dictionary. It looks good. We should send that off. For launch past complex, what do we get? Value from complex is 1337, which is pretty late. So 1337 is the amount in our array of dictionaries. And voila, you are now a master of passing in different types of arguments, simple arguments, complex arguments with our scripts. Cool, so passing in arguments is pretty fundamental and pretty common when you're building out almost anything. And now you're equipped to do so with FCL. Next time, we will learn how to return custom values with our scripts, but until then, happy building, y'all. Bye!